Greetings and various assorted salutations. This is it. We're here. Welcome to the beginning of the Civil War. America unable to resolve its differences over the issue of slavery, the failure of compromises, popular sovereignty, the Supreme Court. None of these groups or organizations were able to resolve this issue of slavery. And what we see is this switch over to cannon and gun and violence as the determiner of the future of slavery and the future of the United States of America. We couldn't figure it out over the span of decades from the founding of our nation, and now the nation divides. Laconically put, failing at compromise, the South leaves and violence ensues. First up, let's take a look at our learning objectives. Now, what we have are three main objectives. First, explain how the election of 1860 triggered a secession crisis. 2, analyze why Southern states chose to leave the United States of America, or the Union. And 3, describe the events of Fort Sumter and how they marked the beginning of open conflict and the beginning of the Civil War. Diving into the terms, sectionalism. This is going to be a topic that comes up in more detail in course, but what we see is a strong loyalty to one's region over national unity. That's going to play a huge role in this conflict. Loyalty to Virginia more than the United States. Loyalty to Ohio more than the United States. Things like that. We see states' rights as another concept that comes up, the belief that individual states have authority over federal decisions. In the context of the 1800s, 1860s, it is the states' rights on the issue of slavery. Pretty much anytime you hear the word states' rights in the Civil War, it means slavery. We're also looking at the election of 1860, which we'll go into more detail, but this is kind of one of the key points to triggering the whole mess. Secession is another word that comes up. Secession is just the formal process of Southern states saying, we are leaving the United States of America, or the Union. You'll hear Union and United States of America. That also refers to the northern states, though that's what those are referring to. We also have another term, border states. These are an interesting group. These are slaveholding states, often those that were part of the constitutional unionists who opted to stay in the United States, stay in the North, and fight against the Confederacy. They valued unity over, well, the issue of slavery. And then we have the Union. That's the other term I mentioned. This is the U.S. government after the South leaves under the presidency of Abraham Lincoln. And they will be preserving the Union, and eventually they will be the ones pushing for the end of slavery as a consequence of the escalation of this conflict. Now, arguably, the starting point of the divide, what formally gets Southern states to say, let's have a secession from the United States, is the election of 1860. Arguably one of the worst elections in American history. Half the country left, and before Abraham Lincoln ever set foot in the White House as President of the United States, sworn in, the South had largely left. It was a mess. How we got to this point is a bit of review. Congress has failed to find a workable compromise. Popular sovereignty, let the people decide. That hasn't worked. See Bleeding Kansas. And the Supreme Court, they weighed in with Dred Scott, and, well, that didn't go over so well. And so slavery is the topic for the election of 1860. Where people stand on it is going to impact how they vote in this election. And what makes this election different is we've got 4 parties at play. Well, 3 parties and one of them split. We have the Republicans, the Northern Democrats, the Constitutional Unionists, and the Southern Democrats. We'll look at each of the candidates one by one. First off, Republican Party. This is a new party focused on dealing with the issue of slavery. They are not as extreme as saying we need to ban it completely. Their main goal is don't allow slavery to expand into the territories. There are some members who are pushing for more removal of slavery entirely, but they're not the main group in the party at this time. Next, we'll skip over to the constitutional. Well, no, let's do the Northern Democrats. The Northern Democrats are led by the familiar name Stephen Douglas. You remember he beat Lincoln a few years prior in the Senate election of Illinois. And he believes, and the Northern Democrats believe, slavery is a topic for each territory to decide through popular sovereignty. It's the Compromise of 1850, basically. They represent this idea of let the people in the region decide whether they're going to be slave or not. Skipping over them for now, let's go over to the Southern Democrats. The Southern Democrats are the other split of the Democratic Party, led by John Breckinridge. They believe that the federal government must defend slavery. They want slavery to be promoted and expanded. They believe slave owners should be able to own slaves wherever they choose to live in the United States of America, whether that be in a territory or something else. They're the pro-slavery party. That's the easy way to remember it. There's another party here, the Constitutional Unionists. This is a bunch of Whigs and others, and they're really worried about the unity of the United States of America. They don't want slavery to be the main focus. They think Americans need to be focusing on other things like keeping the country together. And so they're kind of the people on the fence about the issue of slavery. They want the nation to stay together, and if that involves preserving slavery in some parts, then that's what they would support. This election is quite the chaotic one because the vote is heavily split. The Democrats do not have a united party in this election, and the Republicans are newcomers, and the Constitutional Unionists represent a concern a lot of people have. But if slavery is the dividing thing, you might fall into one of these other camps. And it's a mess. Let's look at the results. Now, in red, if the screen's showing up correctly, Abraham Lincoln takes the North and the new states in the West, California and Oregon. He carries the most electoral college votes. The Southern Democrats kind of have a weird one. They capture one state here. Ironically, though, not their home state. The Constitutional Unionists carry these middle states, these border states, in the middle between the North and the South. And then the Southern Democrats capture the American South. And what makes this problematic is when you add up all the votes, Abraham Lincoln didn't need to win any states in the American South. He won the election. And this is a big deal. This means that if you're a presidential candidate, you no longer have to appeal to the entire country as a consequence. And the Southern Democrats are going to take this as a grievous offense. How can we have a nation a democracy, a republic, that doesn't require listening to all parts of the country? And that's going to be a reason, an excuse given for secession by many southern states, is they do not feel represented in this area. One other thing worth noting, you'll see the territories. Territories do not have a position in the Electoral College, so their vote isn't in the presidential election. So just so you're aware. It's between these red, orange, greens, various shades of green states that are deciding the presidency. Abraham Lincoln takes the election. And many southern states feel that Abraham Lincoln is more extreme than the Republican Party is conveying. They believe that Abraham Lincoln will ultimately end slavery in the entire United States. And between that and that representation issue, we're going to see states start to leave. South Carolina leads the way, seceding first in December of 1860. So the election is in November. South Carolina is out within the month. By February, 6 more states leave. And those 6 states in February are going to decide we are going to create our own version of the United States called the Confederate States of America. It's pro-slavery. It's pretty much entirely made up of those disgruntled Southern Democrats. Many of the Southern Democrats who were in political office in D.C. turn around and find themselves as political leaders in the American Confederacy. We look at the timeline here. This is where we're at. We're February. Now, James Buchanan is the lame duck president in this time period, and he's not going to weigh in a whole lot in this. Things are a mess. He doesn't want to commit troops. He wants the country to stay together, but he's not going to be taking the steps to encourage that decision. He says states can't leave, but if they do, he's not going to punish them for it, basically. Jefferson Davis is elected president of the Confederate States of America. And then, March 1861 is when Abraham Lincoln is finally sworn in as president of the United States of America. Half the country is gone by the time he sets foot in the White House. And then from April to June, more states are going to leave and ultimately join the Confederate States of America. And that's how the Civil War the 2 sides are set up. Southern Democrats politically control the South. The Republicans will come to control the North. The justifications given for secession, why those southern states are leaving: they want to protect slavery. They believe that it is a state's right to preserve the institution of slavery, and they feel that the North has moved too far, and they don't have a voice in that United States of America, so they decide to, create their own. Here's a map showing you what the workup looks like. These deep South states, Georgia, Alabama, they will secede before things get started. And then after an incident we'll look at in just a minute here, at Fort Sumter, these states, Virginia, North Carolina, these ones will join the Confederacy as well. There are some slave states that remain loyal to the United States. Those ones right here. West Virginia is a notable example. West Virginia secedes from Virginia and remains in the Union because they prioritized unity over siding with the Confederacy over these matters. But now, it's going to be a mess. In these early months after the election, people are drawing the lines and figuring out where people stand. The Civil War will divide families. It'll divide relatives. It'll divide communities, especially along those border areas. And the Confederate States of America immediately expects there will be a military response under Abraham Lincoln. And so they begin seizing arsenals and armories and naval ports and military installations in the South from the Union. Their argument is this is our territory now. These are our military bases now. Now, there is going to be some resistance at Fort Sumter. At Fort Sumter, which is, of course, in South Carolina, it guards the port entry to Charleston, one of the important ports of the American South. The Confederates want it. It's a military installation, and it could hypothetically threaten the port of Charleston for the Confederacy. Lincoln tries. He doesn't want to be the one to fire the first shot. He tries to say, look, we're just going to send food to supply this fort, but we're not going to send weapons. The Confederates decide, we want this fort. We don't want to deal with this. We want this part of the United States, the Confederate States, out of the United States. They want a part of the Confederacy. And so they attack the fort. And in a heavy bombardment from the surrounding area, they force the Union to surrender after 34 hours of bombardment. Somehow nobody dies in this whole incident. But this is the shots fired. The war begins. The Civil War kicks off. Abraham Lincoln will call for volunteers. More states will join the Confederacy. And we have ourselves a civil war, a war between the states, if you will. Now, let's take a look at the two sides and see how they stack up. Looking at the chart here, we've got most of the population is located in the north. The Union has some 19 million people in the north. The South has around 9 or so million. We'll look at that statistic more. Most of the infrastructure in this time period, that'd be railroads, telegraphs, and factories, are going to be located in the north. That's where the Industrial Revolution is going on. Most of the military is in the north with the Union. Most of the Navy is in the north in the Union. Most of the weapons being produced in the United States of America were produced in the northern Union states. So based on the numbers, we see the North has the numbers game stacking in their favor. Looking at the basics here, we'll start with the Confederacy. The Confederate States of America is located in Richmond, Virginia for most of the war. President Jefferson Davis has previously stated. We're looking at a population around 9 million plus 3.5 million slaves. And it makes up 11 states. It is worth noting that if you see a Confederate flags, a lot of them have 13 stars, because many thought that more states would join the Confederacy, but they never did. The Confederacy only comprised of 11. Their type of government was a confederacy. If you look at their documents, it looks like the U.S. Constitution, with more states' rights emphasis. There's some stuff pulled from the Articles of Confederacy in that regard. And they're really big in preserving the institution of slavery. They believe it is the states' rights to maintain slavery. Their economy is mostly centered around the growing of cotton and shipping that abroad, which we'll look at in more detail how that matters and how that impacts the war. But that's the Confederate States of America in this picture. These states here. Now, the United States of America, the North, also called the Union, that is their capital still within Washington, D.C. President is Abraham Lincoln. We're looking at about 20 states, 18.5 million, and they're an industrializing economy. They have more factories, they have more manufacturing, they have more production of goods. Whereas the South grows cotton and ships it to be manufactured somewhere else, the North manufactures things and ships it out into the world or sells it within the country for profits. It's one of those Industrial Revolution concepts. But where this war becomes significant in broader scale, this is an instance where an industrial economy, an industrializing nation, is going to war. This is one of the early cases of that kind of conflict, whereas the American South is more of the traditional agrarian, farm-focused economy, which is what we've seen more of up to this point in human history. So it's kind of a old versus new dynamic as well. But we're going to talk more about the different advantages and disadvantages and plans of the two factions in the coming days and get into the Civil War itself. But that's a topic for another time. Until later.